The Sahara heat was a physical weight, pressing down on the dunes until the horizon blurred into a shimmering line of gold.
The pilot knelt in the sand, his knuckles raw and covered in black grease, his gaze locked onto the unresponsive engine of the wrecked plane. He was alone.
The silence of the desert was absolute until a shadow fell across his tools. He did not look up, assuming it was a trick of the light or the rising heat waves. Then, a pair of boots sank into the sand inches from his knees.
He looked up. Standing there was a boy, small and still, holding a glass jar with steady hands. Inside, a single flower rested against the glass,
its petals vibrant against the monochromatic expanse of sand. The pilot let his wrench drop. It hit the sand with a dull, muffled thud. He wiped his forehead, leaving a streak of oil, and stared at the boy.
The prince said nothing, only extended the jar,
offering the fragile bloom to the man who had forgotten that anything so delicate could exist in such a barren place. The desert wind died down, leaving the two of them in a pocket of stillness that felt older than the dunes themselves. The pilot stood, his legs stiff from hours in the sand, and gestured toward a faint, green smudge on the horizon. They began to walk. The prince moved with a lightness that defied the heavy,
shifting dunes. He spoke of his home, a place no larger than a house,
where 3 volcanoes reached for the stars and the sun set 43 times every day. The pilot listened, his mind still tethered to the broken engine, until a sudden movement caught his attention.
A small lizard darted across a sun-scorched stone. The prince stopped, pointing. "What is that?" he asked. Then,
"Why does the wind whistle through the canyons? And why do the stars burn so brightly here?" The pilot knelt, his finger tracing shapes in the sand, trying to explain gravity and light. He faltered.
The technical terms felt hollow, useless against the clarity of the boy's wonder. He looked at the vast,
empty dunes and saw them for the first time as a map of mysteries rather than a cage of heat.
The frustration of the repair faded. He found himself smiling, not at the machine,
but at the questions that hung in the dry air, turning the desert into a classroom of light and shadow. The sun dipped below the jagged horizon, and the warmth drained from the sand in seconds. The air turned sharp and cold. They sat side by side on a flat, weathered stone, watching the sky transform into a velvet tapestry of deep indigo and piercing light. The prince drew his knees to his chest. He spoke of a fox he had met, of the slow, deliberate process of taming. His voice was steady, cutting through the vast silence of the dunes. He explained that to be tamed meant to create ties, to become uniquely responsible for the one you have chosen to love. The pilot listened, leaning back against the cooling rock. The weight of those words hung in the air, heavier than the sand, more permanent than the wind. It was no longer a story about a distant place. It was a mirror. The man felt the sudden, quiet pressure of every bond he had left behind in the world beyond the desert. He looked at the prince, then at the stars, realizing that love was not a feeling, but a labor. The desert, once a place of survival, had become a space of profound, uncomfortable truth. They sat in the dark, the silence between them now filled with the gravity of their own shared existence. The pilot leaned back, his eyes unfocused, tracing the path of a slow-moving satellite. He began to speak of things he had not voiced in decades. He talked of drawing as a boy, of the boxes he used to sketch,
and the dreams that had withered under the pressure of adulthood.
He stumbled over names of people whose faces had blurred into the dust of time. The prince listened, his gaze fixed on the horizon,
occasionally pulling a loose thread from his own sleeve. Then, the prince spoke again of his rose.
He described the precise way he watered her, the shield he built to protect her from the wind, and the quiet ritual of plucking weeds at dawn. The pilot watched the small figure, seeing not a child, but a mirror of his own lost devotion. The man reached out, his hand hovering near the sand,
then drew it back, afraid to break the fragile tension of the moment. They sat in the center of the vast,
indifferent desert, two souls tethered by the simple, heavy truth of what they loved. The distance between the man and the boy vanished, replaced by a sudden, sharp ache of recognition. They spoke until the moon reached its peak, and the desert became a sanctuary for the ghosts of their past. The first light of dawn bled over the dunes, turning the sand into a sea of liquid gold. The temperature climbed, but the bite of the night remained in the air. The prince stood, brushing the fine, pale grains from his knees. He checked his pack, his movements precise and calm. The man stood up slowly, his hand resting firm against the cold, metal wing of the plane. He did not ask the boy to stay. There was no need. They exchanged a brief, sharp nod, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forged in the dark. The prince turned, his silhouette cutting a clean line against the rising sun. He began to walk. The man watched the small figure grow smaller. Retreating into the shimmering heat, the desert no longer felt like a cage of dust and indifference. It was vast, yes, but it was also a place where stars had spoken. The man reached down and picked up his heavy wrench. He looked up at the sky, his eyes lingering on the blue expanse where the stars still hid, feeling his own world shift into something entirely new. The silence was no longer empty. It was full, waiting, and alive.